The last checkpoint was still running, because the dogs refused to leave. At 02:14 Alaska Standard Time, 18 alien vessels dropped through the clouds over the Iditarod Trail and shut down every radio signal within 140 miles, turning one of the most isolated stretches of Alaska into a silent military zone. Every human checkpoint they had mapped was abandoned or evacuated exactly as their models predicted, except for a small wooden shelter at mile 611, where one handler was still boiling water and feeding 14 sled dogs. The aliens believed the shelter was empty of meaningful resistance, and that assumption would cost them the entire operation. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these strange little stories where humanity wins by being humanity, consider subscribing. We're still trying to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and it genuinely helps the channel grow. And while you're listening, tell me this. If aliens landed in the middle of nowhere, would you trust a human with a rifle or 14 sled dogs to notice them first? Because on this particular night, the dogs had already made their choice. At 02:16, Commander Valoris received the final descent report aboard the Orsh reconnaissance carrier Meridian. The report listed 37 human structures, 12 active communication points, 9 fuel depots, and 611 kilometers of trail surveyed. None of the targets had significant weapons. None possessed military-grade radar. None represented a measurable threat to an expeditionary force that had conquered 23 inhabited worlds without losing a single campaign. Valoris stood beneath the tactical display with his hands folded behind his back and watched the blue markers disappear one by one. Surface resistance probability. Below 2%, said the operations officer. Then proceed according to doctrine. The doctrine was older than the carrier, older than Valoris's command, and older than the last 6 species the Orsh had defeated. It had been written after a disastrous expedition in which a civilization disguised military assets as civilian infrastructure. The correction had become simple enough for every Orsh officer to memorize before receiving a uniform. If it cannot communicate, organize, or calculate, it cannot resist. Valoris had built his career on that sentence. It had never failed him. 3 decks below, Junior Assessment Officer Terran Voss was reading the complete ground reports instead of the summaries. He was 31 standard years old, had been promoted twice for identifying errors before they became operational problems, and had a habit his superiors found irritating because it produced questions after decisions had already been made. He stopped at the same line for the 4th time. 14 biological units remain active at Checkpoint 6. The operations officer glanced over. Wildlife. Classification says domestic working animals. Then why are they still there? Voss looked at the thermal image. 14 small heat signatures were clustered beneath a roof, while the humans assigned to the checkpoint had already departed. I don't know. Valoris did not turn around. Then it is irrelevant. Voss closed the report slowly. That was the first warning nobody recorded. At 02:21, 611 kilometers north of the nearest paved road, Mara Keen was measuring dog food into 14 metal bowls. She had been working with sled dogs for 19 years. She had run the Iditarod twice, finished both times, and had spent the previous decade doing something less glamorous, managing dogs, equipment, and emergency logistics at remote checkpoints during winter races. She could identify a dog by the sound of its breathing from 30 feet away. She could tell whether a team was dehydrated by the way its harness lines settled against the snow. She could repair a broken sled runner with 3 tools and a strip of aluminum in under 11 minutes. Nobody considered any of that heroic. Mara preferred it that way. She put the last scoop into a bowl and looked through the open doorway. The sky was wrong. Not dramatically wrong. There was no fire, no thunder, no glowing object falling from the heavens. It was simply too still. Mara had lived around winter weather long enough to distrust silence. Eat first, she told the dogs. Complain after. The dogs ignored her. All 14 were standing. That was unusual. Mara looked at the clock. 02:22. She looked back at the dogs. The lead dog, a gray and white female named Bristle, had her nose pointed toward the east wall. Mara waited. Bristle did not move. What? Bristle's ears shifted. Mara walked closer. There was a faint vibration in the floorboards. She crouched and placed 2 fingers against the wood. Nothing. Then 3 seconds later, the vibration returned. Short. Deep. Regular. Mara stood. That's new. She did not know what was underneath the floor. The dogs did. At 02:24, the first ORSH ground unit entered the checkpoint perimeter. The soldiers moved without sound, their armor absorbed. Bed the snow beneath their feet, and their helmets filtered the air for chemical traces, biological threats, heat signatures, and electromagnetic emissions. The unit contained 8 soldiers and 1 survey drone. Their orders were simple: secure the abandoned checkpoint, confirm the human evacuation, and establish a temporary sensor station before dawn. The drone scanned the building. No weapons detected. The squad leader raised one hand. No active personnel. A second scan passed over the dogs. 14 biological units. Classification: domestic canids. The squad leader lowered his hand. Non-combatant. The dogs watched them enter. Bristle growled. The squad leader turned. One soldier raised his weapon. Negative, said the leader. Animal. The growling stopped. That bothered the soldier more than if it had continued. At the carrier, Terran Voss watched the same feed. Commander. Valoris looked at him. The animals reacted before the survey drone detected the squad. That is expected. The drone was outside the building. Animals possess hearing. Then why did they stop when the soldiers entered? Valoris looked at the screen for exactly 2 seconds. Because they recognize authority. Voss frowned. The answer was plausible. That was the problem. At 02:27, the ORSH established the first sensor mast inside the checkpoint. The mast was 2.4 meters tall and weighed 17 kilograms. It unfolded from a compact cylinder and began scanning the trail in a 12-kilometer radius. For 19 seconds, everything worked perfectly. Then Bristle walked over and urinated on its base. The sensor mast shut down. The squad leader stared at it. Nobody spoke. The drone scanned the mast. Organic contamination. Clean it. A soldier removed a maintenance cloth. Bristle watched. The soldier wiped the mast. It restarted. Bristle walked back and did it again. The squad leader stared at the dog. The dog stared back. Move the mast. They moved it 8 meters. Bristle followed. Move it again. They moved it another 12 meters. Bristle followed again. On the carrier, Voss covered his mouth with one hand. Valoris noticed. Assessment officer. Voss straightened. Nothing, Commander. The sensor mast failed for the 3rd time. The first operational asset was disabled by a 14-kilogram dog. The official explanation would later classify the incident as environmental interference. Mara called it Tuesday. At 02:34, the second problem arrived. The ORSH needed a secure landing corridor. Their ships could descend vertically, but their ground vehicles required a flat surface with low thermal interference. Their maps showed the frozen trail as an ideal route. The snow was compacted, the grade was manageable, and the nearest human settlement was 43 kilometers away. The first transport vehicle moved forward. Its 6 articulated legs sank 11 centimeters into the packed snow. The vehicle corrected. Then it sank again. The pilot increased power. The left side dropped. The right side rose. The vehicle stopped. Surface instability, the pilot reported. The survey drone disagreed. Ground density within acceptable range. The pilot tried again. The vehicle moved 4 meters and stopped. Then Mara appeared outside the checkpoint carrying a mug. She watched the vehicle. The ORSH squad turned toward her. Mara looked at the machine, then at the trail, then at the machine again. You're on the overflow line. The squad leader pointed his weapon. You will remain stationary. Myra took a sip. Sure. She looked down the trail. You'll sink another foot in about 30 seconds. The squad leader's helmet tilted. Your prediction is irrelevant. Myra shrugged. 28 seconds later, the vehicle dropped another 31 centimeters. The soldiers stopped moving. Myra took another sip. Yeah. She turned around and walked inside. The squad leader watched her leave. He did not understand what had happened. The ground beneath the trail had not been uniform for decades. Local mushers knew where winter overflow froze beneath the snow, creating a deceptively solid surface that could collapse under concentrated weight. Myra had seen it hundreds of times. The Orsh had scanned the snow. They had not scanned the history beneath it. At 02:39, Voss added a second warning to the report. Local human demonstrated accurate terrain prediction. Valoris read it. Was the prediction based on technology? No. Calculation? No. Communication with another human? No. Then it is intuition. Voss hesitated. It may be expertise. Valoris looked at him. Expertise is a form of calculation. Then we should classify her as a tactical observer. No, we have no evidence that she can influence the battle. Voss lowered his eyes. The doctrine had another category for things that could observe but not influence. Irrelevant. At 02:43, Myra fed the dogs. At 02:44, all 14 dogs stopped eating. Myra froze. Bristle was staring toward the trail. The others followed her. Gaze. Myra put down the bowl. What now? A sound traveled through the snow. Not loud. Not mechanical. A low pulse that could barely be heard. The dogs moved together. 14 animals. One direction. Myra followed. They stopped beside the old fuel shed. Myra knelt. The snow there was smooth. Too smooth. She brushed it aside. A faint metallic vibration came through the ground. Myra looked toward the alien transport. Then back at the snow. She did not understand the technology. She did not need to. Something underground was moving. At 02:47, the Orsh command network detected an unexplained seismic signal beneath Checkpoint 6. Subsurface structure, reported Voss. Valoris turned toward the display. How deep? Unknown. Natural. Possibly. Voss enlarged the image. The signal repeated every 17 seconds. That pattern is too regular. Valoris stepped closer. What is beneath the checkpoint? Geological records show frozen ground, gravel deposits, and seasonal water channels. No structures. Not according to the database. The signal pulsed again. Every 17 seconds. Valoris watched it. Deploy a probe. Voss looked at him. That may disturb the ground. Then determine whether it is a threat. The probe launched. Myra saw the machine descend from the carrier and pointed toward it. The dogs barked. All 14. The sound rolled across the snow. The alien soldiers raised their weapons. Myra shouted from the doorway. Don't shoot them. The squad leader looked at her. They are emitting hostile acoustic signals. They're dogs. They are directing attention toward our probe. Myra blinked. Yeah. The squad leader paused. Why? Myra looked at the dogs. Because they heard something. The probe disappeared beneath the snow. 7 seconds later, its signal vanished. Voss stared at the empty display. Probe lost. Valoris did not speak. Bristle began digging. Then another dog joined. Then another. Within 20 seconds, 6 dogs were digging at the same patch of snow. Myra grabbed a shovel. Move. The dogs did not move. Mara sighed. Fine. She started digging beside them. The alien soldiers watched in silence. The first mystery was no longer whether the dogs were reacting. It was what they were reacting to. At 02:53, the probe camera transmitted one final image. It showed a dark cavity beneath the frozen ground. Inside the cavity was a network of narrow channels. The channels were not natural. They had been created decades earlier by seasonal overflow and repeated sled traffic, then widened by meltwater and refrozen into a complicated underground path. The alien probe had entered one channel and become lodged. Voss looked at the image. The ground is hollow. Valorous studied it. How extensive? Unknown. Map it. The Orsh deployed 3 additional probes. All 3 disappeared. At the checkpoint, Mara stared at the dogs. You guys knew. Bristle wagged once. Mara looked toward the alien carrier. Of course you did. She had just realized something worse. If the dogs could hear the underground channels, then the Orsh machines were making enough vibration to travel through them. And if Mara could hear the machines now that she knew where to listen, then something else could hear them too. At 03:01, the alien carrier received a warning from its own navigation system. Unknown movement detected. Distance 7.3 kilometers. Direction west. The commander turned. Identify. Insufficient data. Thermal. Glow. Electromagnetic. None. Visual. Snow. Valorus's jaw tightened. Then there is no movement. The warning appeared again. Unknown movement. 7.1 kilometers. Then 6.9. Voss looked at the screen. Commander. I see it. The movement continued. The Orsh sent a drone. The drone flew low over the trail. Its camera found nothing. The warning persisted. Voss requested a wider spectrum. The results showed hundreds of tiny heat signatures moving across the snow. Then hundreds more. Then thousands. Valorus stared. What are those? The answer arrived after 3 seconds. Canids. The commander looked toward checkpoint 6. How many? The operations officer swallowed. Current estimate is 1,004. Silence filled the bridge. Voss spoke carefully. Those are sled dogs. Valorus stared at him. Why are they moving? Voss looked at the tactical map. I believe they are following the same underground vibration. Valorus looked at the map again. The moving dots were spreading across the trail. They were not attacking. They were not forming a military line. They were doing something much stranger. They were following the sound. At 03:07, Mara's radio came alive. The voice belonged to an emergency coordinator 46 kilometers south. Mara, do you have any idea what's happening? Mara looked at the dogs outside. Aliens. A pause. Actual aliens. Looks that way. Are you safe? Mara watched 8 armored soldiers standing 30 feet away. Mostly. Do you need evacuation? Mara looked at Bristle. Bristle was staring into the darkness. Not yet. The coordinator lowered his voice. How many? Ships. Yes. 18. Another pause. Anything we can do? Mara looked at the trail. Keep everyone away from the dogs. Why? Because they're working. That was the last sentence transmitted before the alien jamming field swallowed the channel. At 03:11, the Orsh attempted to establish a perimeter. They placed 24 sensor markers along the trail. Within 8 minutes, 19 had been knocked over. No explosive force was detected. No projectile impact. The markers were simply found lying in the snow. The squad leader reviewed the recordings. The cameras showed dogs passing. The markers fell afterward. Cause? Unknown. Voss watched the replay. He noticed something. The dogs were not touching the markers. They were running past them. Then the markers fell. He magnified the ground. A vibration passed through the snow. The marker shook, then collapsed. Commander, the animals are using the trail. Valoris turned. Explain. The trail is transmitting vibration. That is not a meaningful statement. It is to them. Valoris said nothing. The junior officer pointed at the screen. They aren't organizing themselves. They're responding to the same physical signal. Then they are still animals. Yes. Then the threat remains environmental. Voss lowered his hand. The distinction was becoming expensive. At 03:18, the first human mistake happened. An Orsh soldier fired a pulse into the air to scare the dogs away from a landing corridor. The dogs ran for approximately 12 seconds. Then every dog within 500 meters changed direction. The entire group moved toward the soldier. The soldier stepped backward. The squad leader raised his weapon. Hold. The dog stopped. Bristle stood 15 meters away. She looked directly at the soldier. The soldier lowered his weapon. Bristle turned. The entire group followed. Voss watched the feed. They're not afraid of the weapon. Valoris said nothing. They're learning its effect. Still nothing. They just tested it. Valoris finally spoke. Animals do not conduct tests. Voss looked at him. No, Commander. He glanced back at the screen. They just remember. At 03:25, the aliens tried a different approach. They activated a low-frequency repulsion field around the checkpoint. The field was designed to discourage biological movement without causing injury. The first dog reached its edge. Stopped. Backed away. Then sat down. The second dog did the same. Within 1 minute, all 14 dogs were sitting just outside the field. Mara stood behind them. She looked at the alien soldiers. That's not going to work. The squad leader spoke through his helmet. The field affects biological nervous systems. Okay. Your animal units cannot cross it. Okay. They are contained. Mara nodded. Sure. She looked down. Bristle had started scratching the snow. Mara followed her gaze. The dog was not trying to cross the field. She was digging beneath it. Mara smiled faintly. Oh. The squad leader heard her. What? Nothing. The dogs began digging. The field blocked movement across the surface. It did not block movement through the old drainage channels beneath it. 23 seconds later, 3 dogs disappeared into the snow. The soldiers stared. Mara picked up a shovel. That's why I keep telling people not to build fences where dogs can dig. At 03:31, the alien field lost contact with 6 sensor markers. The markers were underground. At 03:33, a second group of dogs emerged 41 meters behind the Orsh perimeter. At 03:34, another group emerged 72 meters farther west. The dogs had found the channels. The aliens had not. And the dogs were not alone. Human mushers had used those same routes for generations to move around overflow, steep sections, and unstable snow. The dogs had learned the terrain because humans had taught them without ever realizing they were teaching them. At 03:39, Valoris ordered the field expanded. The expansion consumed 18% more power than projected. At 03:42, it expanded again. At 03:45, the dogs simply moved around it. Voss watched the power graph rise. Commander, we are spending more energy redirecting them than they are spending moving. Valoris's eyes remained fixed on the map. Then increase the field. Sir, that may not be necessary. It is necessary. Why? Valoris finally looked at him. Because if we allow the local organisms to dictate our movement, we have surrendered initiative. Voss nodded. The answer was militarily sound. That was what made the next hour so dangerous. At 03:52, the Orsh carrier lowered its main landing platform. The platform descended 14 meters. The dogs stopped. Every dog along a 3-kilometer section of trail stopped. Myra noticed. She stepped outside. Bristle. The lead dog looked upward. Myra looked upward too. The carrier was almost directly above them. Then she felt it. A vibration. Stronger this time. The old ground beneath the checkpoint shuddered. Mara's expression changed. Back. The dogs did not move. Back. Bristle finally turned. The dogs ran toward the shelter. Mara followed. The landing platform touched the snow. The ground sank 18 centimeters. A crack appeared beneath the platform. The Orsh soldiers froze. Voss saw it on the tactical feed. Commander. Valoris looked. The crack spread. Lift the platform. The pilot activated the engines. Nothing happened. The platform was trapped. The snow beneath it had collapsed into the old drainage network. The carrier had landed on a surface that looked solid because it had been frozen from above. The local humans called it overflow. The aliens called it solid ground. The difference was 240 tons. At 04:03, Mara walked toward the trapped platform. An alien soldier blocked her. Do not approach. Mara pointed. You need to move that thing. We are awares. Then stop pushing down. The soldier looked at her. We are applying lift. Not enough. You have no authority to advise us. Mara shrugged. Okay. She turned away. The soldier called after her. What would you do? Mara stopped. She looked back. Unload it. Impossible. Then keep digging. The soldier stared. Mara pointed at the ground. You're sitting on a river. The soldier looked down. There was no river. Mara walked away. Voss heard every word. He opened the terrain report. Then he opened the historical maps. Then he opened the human race archives. There it was. A warning about the exact section. Seasonal overflow. Variable depth. Avoid concentrated loads. He looked at Valoris. Commander. Valoris did not answer. This location was flagged. By whom? Human race officials. Why was it not in our database? Voss stared at the screen. Because it wasn't considered military information. Valoris paused. That sentence stayed between them. At 04:11, the alien landing platform finally lifted free. It rose 2 meters. Then stopped. The platform had caught a steel support beam beneath the snow. The support beam belonged to an old trail bridge constructed 34 years earlier and buried beneath successive layers of snow and ice after the trail shifted. The humans knew the bridge was there. The aliens did not. The platform's lift system strained. A warning appeared. Structural load exceeded safe limits by 14%. Valoris ordered the engines down. That decision saved the platform from breaking. It also left the carrier grounded. At 04:17, the dogs began barking again. Myra looked toward the west. Something was coming. Not an alien machine. Dogs. Hundreds of them. Teams from abandoned checkpoints were moving toward the same section of trail. Some were loose. Some were still attached to sleds. Some had handlers running behind them. The total count reached 1,004. The dogs arrived in waves. The aliens watched them pass. No attack came. No charge. No bite. The dogs simply moved around the carrier, around the soldiers, around the sensor towers, and around the trapped platform. They followed the vibration beneath the snow. Voss watched the pattern develop. He zoomed out. The dogs were tracing the old drainage channels. The entire trail was becoming visible through their movement. It looked almost like a map. Myra saw it too. She pointed. That's where the water runs. A human handler beside her frowned. You sure? Myra nodded. Pretty sure. How? Myra looked at the dogs. They are. At 04:24, the Orsh Command Center finally accepted that the dogs were not random. Their movement exposed 31 weak points in the ground. It also exposed the only stable route around the carrier. The aliens could have retreated. They did not. Valoris ordered the carrier moved along the path the dogs had revealed. Voss looked at him, using the animal's route. Yes. Commander, that contradicts. No. Valoris studied the map. It contradicts our classification, not reality. Voss stopped. For the first time that night, the doctrine had bent. Not broken. Bent. The carrier moved. At 04:31, the first section held. At 04:36, the second held. At 04:41, the third did not. The carrier's rear stabilizer sank into a hidden pocket. The ship tilted 6 degrees. Emergency alarms sounded. The soldiers rushed to secure equipment. The dogs scattered. Mara looked up. She knew what was about to happen. Everybody off the platform. Nobody listened. Mara shouted again. Off. A human handler obeyed. Then another. The alien squad leader looked at her. Why? Because it's going down. The platform shifted. The squad leader finally ordered his soldiers off. 3 seconds later, the rear section dropped. The aliens jumped clear. Nobody was injured. Myra looked at the commander through the snow. See? The squad leader's helmet tilted. See what? Dogs. He looked around. The animals were already moving away from the unstable ground. At 04:49, Valoris ordered a complete halt. No more movement. No more probes. No more fields. The order surprised T. He bridge crew. Commanders. Hold position. The human forces. There are no human forces. Then why halt? Valoris looked at the tactical display. 1,004 moving points surrounded the trail. Not one had attacked. Not one had killed. Not one had even attempted to enter the alien formation. They had simply made every bad decision visible. Valoris touched the screen. Because we have misidentified the environment. Voss looked at him. That is a change in classification. Yes. Will you report it? Valoris paused. Yes. At 04:57, the human emergency coordinator reached checkpoint 6 with 11 snow machines. He stepped out wearing a red parka and carrying a clipboard. Myra looked at him. You brought paperwork. He held it up. Evacuation authorization. Myra nodded. Good. The alien squad leader approached. You are the responsible human authority. The coordinator looked at the alien. Then at the alien ship. Then back at his clipboard. Depends. On what? Which form you have. The alien stared. The coordinator sighed. Look, I need your landing registration, environmental impact declaration, and temporary occupation permit. The squad leader was silent. Mara looked away so the alien would not see her smile. We are an occupying expeditionary force, the alien said. Okay. We do not require your permission. That's not how the trail works. The trail is not yours. The coordinator looked down at his clipboard. It is maintained under state authorization. This region is under our control. Then you'll still need the permit. The alien squad leader looked at Mara. Mara shrugged. I told you. At 0503, the alien commander received the transcript. He read it twice. Then he asked Voss, "What is a permit?" Voss consulted the database. A procedural authorization. Required for military occupation. No. Then why did the human request it? Voss paused. Because he can. Valorous stared at him. That answer was difficult to classify. At 0509, dawn began to brighten the horizon. The alien invasion had been active for almost 3 hours. No city had fallen. No human had been killed. No alien had been killed. But the Orsh had lost 11 sensor probes, 19 perimeter markers, 1 landing platform, 3.7 terawatts of projected operational power, and nearly every usable route through the checkpoint. The humans had lost 1 shovel. Mara considered that the real tragedy. Who took my shovel? Nobody answered. Bristle walked past carrying it. Mara stared. You have got to be kidding me. Bristle dropped the shovel beside her. Mara looked at the dog. Thanks. The alien soldier nearest them watched the exchange. He looked at the shovel, then at the dog, then at the shovel again. He did not understand why that somehow felt important. At 0517, the dogs began moving toward the eastern ridge. All 1004. Mara followed with 6 human handlers. The alien commander watched. Why are they leaving? Voss studied the vibration map. The carrier has stopped transmitting the low-frequency landing pulse. Then the animals are no longer responding. Yes. Valorous looked at the humans. They were never attacking us. No. They were responding to us. Yes. That distinction changed everything. The Orsh doctrine was built around intentional resistance. The dogs had never intended resistance. They had simply responded to pressure, sound, terrain, and each other. The alien force had interpreted every response as an action against it. The commander stood quietly. Then he removed 1 hand from behind his back. He placed it on the tactical console. Recall the ground units. Voss looked up. Sir, recall them. We can still secure the checkpoint. Valorous looked at the map. No. He zoomed in. The dogs had left. The humans remained. The trail remained. The snow remained. Nothing was forcing the Orsh to continue. We will not conquer a place that has not chosen to fight us. Voss stared at him. That sentence was not doctrine. It was a choice. At 0524, the alien soldiers withdrew 300 meters from the checkpoint. At 0531, they withdrew another 2 kilometers. At 0542, the carrier finally lifted from the trail. The snow beneath it collapsed immediately. A hole 9 meters wide opened where the platform had been. Nobody was standing there. Nobody was injured. Mara watched the ship rise. The alien commander appeared on the external communication channel. His face filled the small screen. You are the local expert. Mara looked behind herself. Me? Yes. She shrugged. Guess so. You predicted the ground failures. Most of them. You understood the animal movement. Some of it. You did not understand our technology. Nope. Valorous paused. Yet you prevented casualties. Mara looked at the dogs. They did most of that. Valorous glanced toward the animals. Then back at her. What do you call this system? Mara thought for a moment. Team. The alien commander repeated the word. Team. Yeah. What is it? Hierarchy. Mara looked at Bristle. She makes most of the decisions. Valorous stared. Bristle stared back. Neither moved. Then the alien commander gave a small nod. Understood. The transmission ended. Mara looked at Bristle. You didn't need to stare him down. Bristle yawned. Mara smiled. At 0602, the Orsh fleet began withdrawing from Alaska. They had arrived with 18 vessels. They left with all 18. The human population had suffered 0 casualties. The Orsh had suffered 0 casualties. The only permanent damage at Checkpoint 6 was a broken sensor mast, a buried bridge support, and one missing shovel that eventually turned up under a sleeping dog. The tactical victory was almost irrelevant. The important part was that nobody had died. For Valoris, that became the first line of his revised report. Not conquest. Not defeat. Casualties 0. He considered that number for 17 seconds before continuing. Back on the ground, Mara's life returned to normal faster than the official reports could keep up. The emergency coordinator spent the afternoon filling out 6 pages of forms because the aliens had technically landed without permits. The human handler who had lost his sled found it 3 kilometers west with all 12 dogs asleep beside it. The squad leader's human counterpart, who had spent 4 hours arguing about jurisdiction, went home and discovered his wife had left a note reminding him to buy milk. And Mara returned to feeding 14 dogs at 0630, exactly as she had done every morning for 19 years. Bristle was still beside the doorway. Mara poured the first bowl. You first. Bristle waited. Mara poured the second. The dog still waited. Mara looked at her. What? Bristle glanced toward the sky. Mara followed her gaze. The alien ships were gone. The sky was ordinary again. Mara looked back. Eat first. Bristle finally lowered her head. Mara smiled. The phrase had always meant that breakfast came before trouble. Now it meant something else. It meant that after the strangest night Alaska had ever seen, the world could still return to something ordinary. 3 days later, the Orsh Military Council reviewed the incident. The official file was 184 pages long. The first 73 pages documented atmospheric entry. The next 41 covered terrain failures. 20 pages analyzed human procedural interference. 9 pages concerned the stolen shovel. The remaining pages concerned the dogs. The final classification was written in dry administrative language. Working canids associated with human logistical systems shall no longer be categorized as passive environmental organisms when operating within contested terrain. Their movement, sensory response, social coordination, and learned geographic behavior may constitute an indirect tactical factor despite the absence of formal communication or centralized command. Voss read the amendment. Then he read the next line. Revision effective immediately across all expeditionary doctrine. He leaned back. That is going to be embarrassing. Valoris signed the document. It is better than being wrong twice. Voss looked at him. Do we classify the dogs as military assets? Valoris considered the question. No. Why not? Because they were never soldiers. Voss waited. Valoris added one final sentence to the report. They were simply where they were supposed to be. 6 months later, the Orsh sent a diplomatic team to Alaska. They arrived with no weapons. They carried no landing field. They brought a translator, 2 scientific observers, and a permit application printed in English. The human official at the checkpoint looked at the document. You filled out Section 14. The alien ambassador nodded. Yes. Environmental section. Yes. Animal interaction waiver. The ambassador hesitated. Yes. Mara, standing behind the desk, looked impressed. You learn fast. The ambassador looked toward the 14 dogs. We received instruction. Bristle walked past. The ambassador stepped aside immediately. Mara noticed. Smart. At 0630 the next morning, Mara was measuring dog food again. 14 bowls. 14 dogs. One shovel leaning against the wall. The same cold air. The same wooden floor. The same gray light coming through the window. Myra placed the first bowl down. Bristle looked at her. Myra looked at Bristle. You first. The dog lowered her head. Myra poured the second bowl. Outside, the trail stretched for hundreds of kilometers into the snow, still carrying the marks of sled runners, boots, machines, and 1,004 sets of paws that had changed an alien military doctrine without ever knowing there had been a war. Myra watched the dogs eat. She picked up her mug. Then she looked toward the empty sky. There had been a time when she thought expertise meant knowing what would happen next. Now she knew better. Expertise was knowing what to listen to when nobody else heard anything. The greatest weapon on the trail had never been a gun, a ship, or a machine. It was knowing where you stood. If you were wondering whether the aliens ever came back, they did. They just filed the paperwork first. And if you were wondering whether Bristle ever stopped staring at the sky, she did not. Myra never asked her why. She already knew the answer. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is trust the ones who notice first. So what would you trust more if you were trapped in the wilderness during an alien invasion? Your technology or the animal that has learned the land better than you ever could? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for listening.